Hello, welcome to my channel, Save Infinity. So in this video, I just wanted to briefly kind of talk about the idea of, moving away less from a sort of very 3D linear type way of operating and engaging with our reality, and instead kind of, branching out into that more sort of, 5D, if you want to call it, sort of, fluid, present moment, sort of less linear and more, infinite, if you will, sort of way of, interacting and going about things. With non-attachment and letting go and all of that sort of stuff, and staying, more present in the here and now rather than, the past or future, or being attached to sort of, certain linear type 3D perceived timelines. And it seems, particularly relevant as well with the time of me recording this. We have a full moon coming up tomorrow, which is also, such a great energy for the whole aspect of, letting go and, releasing those sort of energies that, we no longer want to be attached to, or no longer serve us or align with our path, to, really release that all out, to allow the new energies to come in afterwards. Just not being, so attached to certain outcomes or things that have happened in the past that kind of, formulate in such a 3D linear way in our mind and energy that, kind of generates for us to expect then certain things to follow based off that sort of, linear pathway behind us. Then we sort of, calculate and analyze and predict what, could be occurring moving forward, and instead sort of, freeing ourselves from that and sort of loosening up that background in a way that then you're able to sort of pivot your way forward a lot more, fluidly, with a lot more opportunities in that aspect, rather than, kind of being so strictly based to that one, strict 3D linear line that then just, moves forward. Instead, you can kind of free yourself up a bit more in that way. And so not only doing so energetically within yourself, releasing certain energies or memories, or, healing certain aspects of, trauma or attachment to things, or however that works for you, but also, can do so in a physical sense, in our physical reality as well, removing certain objects that we no longer need or align to, or that, hold certain energies or what have you for us that, aren't necessarily serving us in the way we want to navigate moving forward. Or even, in other aspects as well, not with, literal objects, or just, energetic sort of, clearing within, yourself, but also, sort of more energetic clearing or cleansing within your physical reality as well, with, like cleaning and things like that. Really refreshing up not only your own inner energy, but the energy around you as well, can really kind of help with that whole sort of idea and, ritualization of that sort of letting go. And, sometimes as well, you can get, little nudges or what have you from spirit or the universe, in regards to certain things that, maybe you could be letting go of that will benefit you. Sometimes maybe something will randomly break, or, start to break, which is, a good sign that, it's time to release that, or, certain things can just go on. Like, for example, for myself recently, I got a message about, jumping through another portal soon, and then not too long after, my phone started, glitching and having issues, and I ended up, needing to factory reset it, and I hadn't backed my phone up in a couple of weeks, so I lost a whole bunch of, data and all that sort of stuff, which, can be frustrating on one hand, but just going with that letting go and accepting the flow of things, is such like a good practice and way to navigate, through those things, especially as we also, don't know the benefits of such things occurring as well. It even gave me that time to think about as well, rather than just downloading, re-downloading all the apps I used to have on my phone. Really kind of, sitting and thinking about what what apps I really like need to use, or what sort of things I really do need to have on my phone to kind of, also just like clear up energy and space and, attention and, all that sort of stuff, just even within that aspect as well. Like there's so many aspects and ways that we can kind of clear up these sort of, attachments and energies and cut cords to free up that space for, new energy and new things to be, coming into our reality or to be focused on instead. And even with the idea as well of like shifting timelines, if you will, sometimes certain objects or energies don't align to those sort of timelines that we are shifting to, or that we want to shift to. And so sometimes certain energies or what have you will need to be removed, or certain objects or what have you, even in the aspect of that they just don't align to the new sort of timeline that we're going to or shifting into. And sometimes that might not all make sense to, your conscious sort of, human brain right away. But, sometimes that can kind of clear up energy in a way that allows and makes things easier for you to shift and move through to. It's not, tying you then down to certain timelines where, those sort of energies or, what have you can kind of be tying you to certain timelines. If they're released, it can kind of free you up in a way that you have that more fluid movement to be able to move through to different sort of timelines, rather than, being anchored down with certain energies. Kind of like pulling that anchor up, if you will, so you're free to move around. And depending as well, what sort of aspirations you have, or motivations you have, and sort of what sort of timelines you're trying to shift to, or what have you, or even just depending on how reality itself on a collective level will unfold as we like move forward and ascend more into these sort of higher ideas and ways of being and living. Getting into such a practice of being able to let go in that sort of way and have that non-attachment and go with the flow really helps you to be able to ground and adjust to these sort of new ways of being, kind of moving away from that really strict linear 3D type perspective and way of existing, and kind of really going out more into that fluid sort of aspects. Kind of like an example I've used, before in previous videos with like the whole Mandela effect type style things, even like little things like that, occurring, if they were to start occurring more as you're, shifting and weaving through different timelines, or as collectively as we kind of, shift through, more different timelines, and little things like that, for example, like little Mandela effect style things occurring, if you really are holding on to that sort of strict linear 3D way of perceiving and existing, it can really, discombobulate your mind and destabilize your energy a bit in a way that doesn't make that process and journey so pleasant and enjoyable. You don't want to resist such things, and instead kind of go with the flow of certain things and adjust and pivot as you can. Staying anchored to the present moment in a sense, rather than, staying anchored to certain things in the past, needing to be carried forward in that way. And the more, flexibility you have in that aspect, the more, flexibility your reality is able to have as well, without, upsetting and throwing off your nervous system. Kind of, with the idea of anchors, as I was saying before, if you kind of think of yourself as like driving that boat, through the sea of infinity, if you have so many different anchors to different energies, or, different ideas or memories or what have you, and attachments to, different past things that you've, collected along on your journey, then, trying to like drive through that sea is going to be a lot more, like slowed down and bogged down with those anchors sort of, pulling and restricting and limiting you a little bit. Whereas if you kind of release a lot of those anchors, you have a lot more like freedom to just, really zoom around as you please. But also not needing to be so ruthless with it all, in an aspect that you know, you make all of that an unpleasant experience for yourself as well. You know, allowing yourself to take the time to do those sort of things as you need, or to process things as you need, and you know, to ground and realign as you need, not feeling like you need to, you know, do it so like rushed and ruthlessly. You know, you can be gentle with the process as well, but just kind of, you know, being mindful of that process and allowing it to happen, and taking steps as well as you feel called to do so, to really kind of, you know, readjust yourself more to that sort of mindset and aspect of, you know, letting go, non-attachment, being in the present moment, and having that, you know, more fluid, gentle approach, rather than really like rigid or attached on, you know, latching on sort of approach. And allowing yourself to just go with the flow as well, in that aspect as well of the sort of things that may just happen like that naturally in your reality. You know, sometimes you don't even need to take the steps to remove certain anchors, or for energies or what have you to, you know, be removed or transformed. Sometimes that just happens naturally around you, and, you know, not becoming overwhelmed through that process. And allowing yourself to go, you know, with the flow with those sort of things as well, and just seeing it as all as part of the process of, you know, what needs to occur to get your boat to, you know, wherever you're going in that ocean. You know, so letting go, trusting the flow, and having, you know, having faith that, you know, it's all leading you to a more aligned, you know, timeline and reality for yourself to experience. Even just in the aspect as well, you know, sometimes just being able to get good with that sort of process really assists as well in, you know, remembering and learning that you don't truly, you know, need anything outside of yourself, as everything, you know, you already seek and have within as well in that aspect. So the more we're kind of, you know, able to go with the flow in that aspect, and not become, you know, too attached to certain things, and you know, can be okay with certain things, you know, falling away or being removed or what have you, the more easier it is, you know, moving forward just through life. And generally when these sort of things just do happen, you know, it's like you've always got that centered sort of balance and state within yourself, where, you know, such things just occurring naturally won't, you know, destabilize you or throw you off. You still have that grounded center. And also, as I mentioned as well, you know, really helps then as well with having a more fluid experience within your greater reality as well, when you're more, you know, open and able to digest such experiences in that way, that you can go with the flow more in that way. It allows then more opportunities and things to come toward you, if you're able to be more, you know, fluid with that sort of pivoting, rather than, you know, being on that sort of strict sort of, you know, 3D linear timeline, where only those certain things along that timeline can, you know, come into your reality or be experienced. You know, when you have that more fluid approach, you're really able to, you know, and the universe is able to really kind of bring a more array of, you know, options and experiences towards you. Alright, well, I might leave this one here for now. Sending you so much peace, love, light, and blessings as always. Bye.